Migrating to modern Angular. Why do we need automated migrations? Please take a couple of seconds and remember your old pain points, like when trying to migrate some code. Not Angular material, other stuff. Good. The thing is, manual code migrations have a lot of pain points. And for example, they are boring and repetitive. Of course, making the same code changes over and over again makes coding boring. And of course, having old code in your, let's say, code base or old features that you can replace with newer ones, of course, is going to be better. And of course, time is money. Updates take too much development time, and of course, because of that, they are also expensive most of the time. Angular has like 3 core values, and of course is, let's say, based on these 3 ones, like performance. Angular is about being performant by default, having a good developer experience, and of course being always stable and reliable no matter what we do. But I'd say that it's not just delivering web apps with confidence, but it's about delivering with confidence itself, because it's a compliant framework that, of course, gives us things like good documentation. This, of course, new, so we can learn easily the new features, but also old stuff. Having good component development kit that we can use instead of recreating everything from scratch. For example, accessibility module, building accordions, collections, drag and drop menus, list boxes, dialogues, clipboard stuff, and many more. And of course, on top of that, also giving us at least one type of design system, that is the Angular material design or material design system, but with Angular components. This means that you don't have to always use it, but it's there. And the thing is, most of the time when we have breaking changes is because we want to go against design system principles, material design system principles, and put our own into that. The second one is standards. Angular is about, most of the time, standards. And by that, I mean it pushes into you, but not just Angular itself, but at this point also the community, it pushes you this, let's say, coding style guide. Is that saying that all Angular apps are the same? Until they're not. And the thing is, because Angular has this, let's say, coding style guide, it makes it easier for all the developers to, of course, get onboarded easily into any Angular project, because most of the time you'll find the same forms module, you'll find the same router, animations, what else? HTTP, what else? You don't work with Angular? Anyway. The thing is, style guides change because coding patterns change. And of course, there's a new RFC that gives us some ideas on how that, let's say, Angular style guide can improve. And of course, it says that the first one was released in 2016, so I think 8 or 9 years now, because a lot of web development has changed, and of course, patterns has evolved. Angular also has to update its own. So take a look at that one, and of course, give your opinions if you haven't already. The third one is security. Angular is a secure framework, and as Martina said, it's, I think, the only one who takes security into really seriously and into consideration. It releases every 6 months a new major version, and of course, has long-term support for at least 1 year. The third one is maintenance, and I want to focus that because Angular is always about migrating to the, let's say, latest without never breaking the old code. So even if there's new things in the Angular roadmap that look like, hey, this probably will change Angular forever, probably it will, your old code will still keep working the same. So, and if it doesn't, then probably will be some kind of migrations that migrate your code to the new stuff. But probably it never will change, or it never breaks. And of course, sometimes feel like we're trying to always catch up to the new Angular stuff. Sorry. Basically, we have basically we have, let's say, Angular just really going really fast. And of course, a lot of big projects cannot just easily migrate to the latest because, big code bases. But there's tools to make it easier. That's where automatic migrations come to the rescue. And of course, because everything becomes automatic, we can say bye-bye to repetitive work. We can update incrementally. We don't have to go big bang refactoring the whole code base all at once to just get this all new features. And of course, because things are automated, you don't have to do code changes manually. You save time, and at the same time, you save money. I'm Enea Jahollari. I'm working with push-based on large migrations sometimes, performance improvements on big apps, and of course scalable Angular architectures, which sometimes you'll use a lot of old Angular, let's say, code, but also at the same time having those things migrated to the new ones, like new features easily using these migrations. And of course, instead of just using built-in Angular migrations, I'm also, let's say, been working on writing my own code migrations that most of the time they were published on ng extension library. How to migrate? Well, there's this thing called ngUpdate that you probably have used at least once, twice, or third, depending on when you started, using Angular, or I don't know, if you got a project that is on Angular 8 or 9 and had to run it at this point, you have to run it at least 10 times because we're on 19. And in order to migrate to the latest, you just say ngUpdate, Angular core at latest, Angular CLI at latest. And of course, you should always use -- force because probably that won't work. Your dependencies probably will break. And of course, ngUpdate will migrate the breaking changes that Angular introduces, or when some default patterns that were used before change, then Angular probably will go and migrate those by default. For example, it will always migrate your TypeScript version, your RxJS version, or your Zone.js version. And you probably won't see it because at this point, we have seen that it's reliable when it migrates those things. And of course, sometimes it migrates imports for classes from one entry point to another. I think the last one was replacing HTTP client module with the provide HTTP client. And we also saw, I think in version 14, where it migrated all the reactive forms from just, I think, form group to untyped form group, for example, or untyped form control. So now it gives us the possibility to add, let's say, types to our forms without having to do all the changes, or not being able to migrate to the latest without changing those further. So these kind of things are really good, and of course, Angular will always take care of them. But what about all the new cool features? And I mean cool with, ESBuild, build tooling, or standalone components, new control flow, signals, signal input, signal queries, route lazy loading, self-closing tags, inject, and a lot more. Well, in order to look at what Angular offers, you can just write ngg at Angular core, ngUpdate -- help, and it will list all the optional migrations that Angular supports. And in version 19, you'll see something like this. It offers you control flow migration, inject migration, route lazy loading, signal inputs, queries, and standalone, and we will check all of them one by one. And of course, there's a part of community provided migrations that I talked before, and of course, ng extension. I had to put it out there. Basically, it provided some kind of migrations before Angular official ones were released. And of course, it's thanks to all the contributors that make it possible. And at this point, it's like, thank you. At this point, it has 32K weekly downloads, so that's a lot to me. So check it out if you want some reactive primitives and, of course, migrations. And of course, same as we can list migrations for Angular core, we can list the migrations for, let's say, community libraries, and we can use the same command. Like instead of Angular core, we use ng extension with ngUpdate -- help. And at this version, I think in version 4, it will provide basically what Angular provides today by default. So DI to inject. It also gave you outputs, queries, signal inputs, self-closing tags, and single file components. But of course, the Angular ones are better and of course, well-tested and more powerful than what we provided. We did something because it was needed. So we also have that, last one, like 2 self-closing tags that probably will be provided in Angular 19 if I have time to work on that PR again. So ask Michael to give me some time off. So let's migrate. Going standalone. The reason that standalone, I think, is a must is because it gives us a simplified mental model. We don't have to think about the indirection that NgModules, let's say, give to us. And of course, better developer experience, better tree shaking, easier tree shaking for the compiler, I guess, even though it does it with NgModules too. And of course, easier lazy loading. Standalone, of course, the flag is true by default in v19, so you don't need to put that standalone true anymore. It's true by default. But if you have NgModule-based, let's say, components, Angular by default will migrate all your components to be standalone false. It's that kind of migrations that NgUpdate provides by default. And of course, in v19, you also get a warning on your VS Code or the compile output where you can see what kind of imports were unused in the template. So now you will see basically what you can remove from that imports array. And that's, I think, one of the best features that Angular has released when it comes to standalone. Not yet. It's available, just kidding. So what other features that standalone enables is host directives, or directive composition API, which is, I think, one of the best features when it comes to creating, let's say, reusable logic. For example, the whole CDK module that we have on Angular CDK now can be easily applied on your components, and you don't have to do, I don't know, crazy tricks to extend them, but you just put them as host directives, and instead of having to recreate all those menus, with custom solutions, you just, let's say, add CDK menu into your, component, and you just get those things for free. And I think that's crazy good. And of course, the second one is the defer block. In order to lazy load components today in Angular, I mean, not today, but before defer, you had to just do some crazy tricks with view container ref, ng templates, knowing when to show the loading, when to cancel the loading, show the error, show the component, and all those crazy things. But with defer, you just get all those lazy loading out of the box. Of course, defer itself now also enables us to do partial hydration or incremental hydration, which, of course, Michael, I think, will give a talk later, right? Good. And in order to migrate to standalone, of course, there's also a schematic, which is Angular core standalone, and that will give us 3 ways of migrating. And the first one is just convert the declarations of modules to standalone. That probably will work really good if you're not, I don't know, doing a lot of component extensions or extending components and declaring them in multiple modules, because that probably, there's no compiler or magic thing that can fix those components. And the other thing is, the moment that it converts those, let's say, standalone components, not standalone components to standalone, it says, hey, you can now remove empty ng modules that you don't need anymore. And after that, gives you the possibility to just also remove that up module and migrate to the Bootstrap application API. There's also another, let's say, schematic that is about migrating the routed standalone components to be lazy loaded. I also contributed this one to Angular. And what it does is, if you have, let's say, a path, a feature, for example, and you have a component, feature component, that now is migrated to standalone, you don't have to go manually and convert that to load component, but you just run a schematic And of course, it does all the migration for you. Basically goes from the first one to the second one automatically. And you just get that by just doing Angular core route lazy loading. It may save you, I don't know, 20 minutes, but 20 minutes is good. This is, I think, a demo. You just run it, migrates, that's it. Then you need to run probably the formatter after or when you commit. Migrating to inject. Inject is great. I think it's also one of the coolest things that Angular has released. And I think it made possible all the new cool APIs that we have today that are function-based. It gave life to inject, function-based interceptors, function-based guards, resolvers, I don't know what else, a lot. Of course, when you extend components, you don't have to pass, let's say, the services anymore to those components that you extend. You just inject once and you don't care anymore about it. And of course, there's no decorators needed. Of course, in order to just migrate automatically, you just say NgG Angular core inject. That's really great. There's a new control flow. Who have used the new control flow? Good. Who has done that manually? Sad for you. Good. Control flow, of course, is really good. It's an easier mental model. You don't have to care about ngIf or ngTemplate and ng other templates when you want to do something like else if and stuff like that. It has better type narrowing. And with the new 4, you also get better performance because there's less stuff to do at runtime. And of course, in V19, I guess, or V18, at 4, we'll also give you diagnostic about wrong track usages. Like if you're rendering too much a list item, it will say, hey, look, you probably want to change the tracking function. Also, if you're having issues with formatting, you'll need to make sure you're at least in version 3.3.3 with prettier. And to get to the new control flow, you just do Angular core control flow. Let's migrate the signals because I don't have a lot of time to lose. Only 5 minutes. Good. Why signals? Well, with normal change detection, like that we have had before with observables and normal values, the moment that you change something in your app, Angular doesn't know what changed. So it has to go and check all the bindings that you have in your application. But with the new signal stuff, and if you use onPush at the same time, Angular now can just skip a lot of checks and only go check what's needed or what changed. And that's possible because of signals and how they work. So basically, the moment that you change a signal, Angular will go and just do the binding check first. And if it changed, also refresh the DOM. And that's local change detection for you. The coolest thing about signals is that you probably won't get this error anymore. So I think that's the only reason you should migrate to signals. You shouldn't have to see that anymore. And of course, I also gave a talk about it at NgRome, so that's the link that you can watch it. Let's skip signal inputs. You can migrate to signal inputs just by doing Angular core signal input migration. And what that will do is, if you have those kind of inputs in your apps, like with types or no types, with required or no required, with alias or not, it will migrate all of those to the new input signals or signal inputs. And of course, do all that automatically, and it just works. Of course, if you extend components and do, let's say, crazy things with your inputs, or you set your inputs in a child component, then probably Angular won't migrate those, but tell you, hey, look, we cannot migrate this for some reasons. And signal inputs, of course, let's say makes computing properties possible, and of course, in a performant way, makes using resource and the Rx resource APIs easier, linked signal too. And of course, there's a, let's say, feature on VS Code now, thanks to the Angular extension, basically that you can just click a bulb and it will migrate your, let's say, inputs incrementally. You don't have to do it like Big Bang. So you can do per input only or for the whole file. And of course, there's 2 ways to do it safe mode, where it only makes sure that changes things that are safe, or just say, hey, I don't care. Break it, I just want to have the new signal inputs, and it will, of course, ignore all the errors that you probably have caused. And of course, there's this new two APIs that is insert to-dos on best effort mode that will add this to-dos to your code base to tell you, hey, you cannot migrate because it's too complex to migrate this one. And if you have input setters, you probably will have to do those manually. Signal queries. Of course, as I said, better DX than normal queries with decorators. You don't have to care about, I don't know, query.value changes or something changes, because you can just put that inside an effect or compute it, and it will work same as the other signals. And just like inputs, you can migrate incrementally per input file and in safe mode or force. And this is, of course, the query migration that you can use. Outputs. Outputs are not signal-based, but it was needed because it would just look weird to have decorator-based APIs and not decorator-based APIs. So it's a stylistic change. It has better types than the old one. And of course, you can also migrate incrementally. This will just work the same way as the old inputs. You can also emit from these outputs. And of course, you can migrate to them just by doing output migration. You can migrate to self-closing tags. Who hates self-closing tags? Yes, hey. OK, no one, good. You can migrate to OK, well, you can migrate just by using ng extension this time instead of Angular core, but maybe we'll, let's say, land this in Angular itself by doing convert to self-closing tag, and it will go migrate your whole project to self-closing tags. You can migrate to single file. Who hates single file components, so inline templates and styles? One? OK, good. To you haters, you can migrate to single file components by doing ng extension convert to single file components. And what this will do is copy your HTML file into your inline template. There's option to skip styles, but also include the styles too. And of course, you don't have to maintain 3 files now. This is, I think, the best part. You can migrate incrementally easily. You don't have to do big bag refactorings. In WebStorm, there's run configurations where you can do this run configurations where you can pass this file path relative to project root. And of course, what this will do is give you the possibility to just click a button and, of course, migrate around that migration. So in this case, we have old control flow. You click a button, your component just changes, and that's, I think, really great. There's also some love for VS Code users. So you can create user tasks. So you click on tasks, open user tasks, you add a task, and instead now you use relative path, and you just run it when you need it. And of course, it will list all your custom, let's say, tasks. If you can migrate to latest version and you want to use these migrations, what you can do is you can do it step by step. So you just create another branch, update Angular version, run the schematics, but not push the changes of the package JSON, but only what you, let's say, need from the, let's say, migration changes. This is a table with everything. Like, it doesn't look OK from the light here, but there's a version of Angular where that feature is supported or that migration is provided, the developer experience or performance or maintenance impact, and of course, the effort it takes to run those migrations. There's also this Angular experiment roadmap where you can find, let's say, what's possible and what's not to use. And I'll have to probably say this. Angular is about having incremental, backwards compatible, migratable, focused on developer intent and evidence-based and delightful migrations and changes. What else can we migrate? What else can we migrate? Maybe these things in a close future. Or I don't know, new function components. No, just kidding. I'm Enea Jahollari. Thanks for your time. Any questions?